What is up, group members, and happy Men's Mental Health Month. I'm licensed psychologist, Dr. Kristen Casey.
I'm licensed psychologist, Dr. Jessica Rabon.
And I'm licensed psychologist, Dr. J.
KBI is out today. She's probably eating muffins. We will miss her. And today we're going to be talking about men's mental health. So settle in, take a seat, and welcome to group therapy. Last week, we explored LGBTQ plus health and healthcare disparities. And we asked you, what is one thing that you will do this month to celebrate, advocate for, or support LGBTQ community, people within the community? And you said, I'm going to take my son to his first Pride Fest.
Let's go.
That's so amazing.
I took my daughter to her first last weekend.
Did you
had
really?
So much fun.
Hey.
Yes. Every
Did you have
2-year-old is obsessed with rainbows. I'm just gonna, I don't know if your son is.
So
but,
sweet. That's so sweet.
No, it was great. It was great. She had so much
I love
fun.
it. I'm so happy you had that experience. Someone else said, educate at work. I have a great presentation about allyship topics. I love it.
Awesome.
And the last one was enjoy karaoke at our local gay coffee shop. I love that.
Love it.
So let's start with some stats about men's mental health. Can anyone enlighten us?
Sure, why not? So, 1 in 5 men experience a mental health problem each year, which is 20%, if my math is mathing. Over 6 million suffer from depression. And an interesting point about that is many men go undiagnosed. So that's an underreported number because men are far less likely to report feeling sad or the worthlessness, which tends to be sort of like, oh, that sounds like depression. So because we're not talking about feeling sad or we feel worthless, tend to go undiagnosed. And one that I think is so important is women are about twice as likely to go to therapy than men. About 25% of men or women go to therapy each year, with about only 13% of men.
Gosh, I'm even thinking of like my caseload, and it's mostly women, trans individuals, some non-binary people, and then maybe like just a couple of men. Maybe. Yeah.
Same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same.
It's wild.
And I've experienced that across settings, private practice, university, community mental health. It holds true.
Yeah.
Some other stats that I wanted to share. 90% of people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia by age 30 are men.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That is
90.
like, it's so rare to see a number that high. Like if you think about stats, you know what I mean? 90%.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Suicide is the 7th leading cause of death among males, and men are 4 times as likely than women to die by suicide. And approximately 1 in 5 men develop alcohol dependency during their lives.
Wow.
Such a high amount. Yeah.
And I think of like substance use as a way to cope. And to Justin's point before, I wonder if more people were able to access mental health care, especially men, if that number would change. I don't know. Who knows?
And it just fits. I know we're going to get into talking about like the societal cultural norms, but maybe I'm just going to jump right into that.
Do it.
Why
Yeah,
not?
jump in.
The bulk of it it just is the norm for men to cover up, mask, push down, whatever it is you're feeling and experiencing. So it's like thinking about a man reporting sadness, feeling worthless versus a man going to the bar after a long week and just drinking. One of those fits a cultural norm of what we teach men from a young age, even like young boys. Like, how do you tough it out? How do you suck it up? Like, these things still very much exist. It doesn't matter whether you live in a progressive state or you grew up in a progressive family. This is still very much messaging you get through social media at large of what it means to be not just a young man, but a man.
It's crazy. I'm reflecting on me and my grandpa were really close, and he passed away last year, but or earlier this year. And he literally was like, I think it was like just a couple weeks before he passed away. He's like, I really have to tell you something. So I'm like bracing for something like this big secret or like this, whatever. He's like, I'm really anxious about dying. I was like, oh my gosh. First time he's ever shared an emotion with me ever in his whole entire life. And I was like, for him, he was holding on to that and he felt it so deeply, you know? And I was like, I asked him, I was like, what was difficult about telling me this earlier? Like, I know the death and dying process is different for everybody. And I was like, how long have you been feeling this way? He's like, oh my gosh, I've had anxiety or like this worry since I'm like 15. I'm like, I would have never known. Like, I would have never, this is somebody who I was really close with. And I think that when we got to talking, he was saying like, if I were to tell you, then I feel like you wouldn't be able to rely on me, or you wouldn't see me as somebody who you could come to if you were struggling. And I always thought like, he thought that voicing that he had emotions was going to make me trust him less. So even that like norm that he had in his own mind, which I didn't feel that way at all, but he may have thought that it just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, Pops, you could have told me this like years ago. It would have been okay.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and I think of, what emotions are boys and men raised to be quote unquote allowed to express. So obviously like happiness, joy, things like that. And then anger. Yeah. But we don't, there's like boys don't cry. There's no crying in baseball. Like I'm trying to think of cliches that, crying is a sign of weakness, tough it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, like all of those things. And Justin, I love that you said, even if you live in a progressive family or progressive state, you're still getting these messages.
Totally.
Because you can have the most progressive family. And I mean, I obviously work with children and teens, and I have fortunately seen a shift of parents encouraging like younger children and teens to get mental health help. But then the second they're, if they're in the hospital, their friend comes to visit, they're like, oh, no, I'm fine. Yeah, this chronic illness that I've been hospitalized for. And then it's
like, I'm fine.
Really impacting my mental health. Nope, I got this.
Good. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's so, when you just zoom in on emotion, like emotional expression, even joy. Like, I was just thinking about this before we started recording, because I was just watching a video, Francis the train guy. Have y'all seen Francis? He gets so hyped for trains. Yes. Like, he's always recording his own face. But like, I think about this of like, as being raised as a young boy into young man, now a man or whatever, is like, even if you express a lot of joy, it's like not allowed within the masculine box. It's like, why are you so hyped? Like, it's like stoicism and anger is really still what rules the day. Of like, if you're just so excited or joyful, people will be like, like, what's up with you? And
why are you so excited?
Shame. You can't even get that excited about something unless maybe if it was within like you were watching sports. Like, and I know because I grew up.
But that's true.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Right before we hopped on to record, I opened Facebook and I saw this quote and I was like, I have to remember that for the pod. Random, like Facebook status from somebody super random that said, emotions are not masculine or feminine. They're just human. And I was like,
that's powerful.
The Facebook gods were like, you need to see this post because it is. Like, we all have emotions, yet society, and I truly blame the majority on society, whether that's within a family system or the larger society, tells men, no, you don't have the full spectrum of emotions. You have, stoicism, anger. I don't know. I was going to say arrogance. Arrogance is an emotion, but like you have to like
confidence.
Confidence. That's a good one.
Bravado, yes, I get what you're saying.
I'm even thinking about the things that aren't said, but men just emulate as models for even like younger men, like if you have a dad or a grandfather or just like a man in your life who's just kind of like balanced or just say even keel. They don't like show like all the big emotions, whether they're good or bad. I mean, you kind of inadvertently learn that you just kind of hold it in. I mean, even if nobody's telling you this, I mean, you're getting it from society and then you're noticing, your dad act this way or your, mom's boyfriend act this way or something like that. And you just think that's normal. And I wonder if there's space and opportunity to share emotions, like for men to share emotions when they're younger, if that, and I really don't know the answer to this because I don't have that experience because I'm not a man. I wonder if that makes it easier when you get older to express emotions. I don't know.
I think so. I think the same thing. I think about what my dad modeled for me. My dad was always working, like always working, even weekends. Like he just never stopped. And that's like all he knew. He didn't have a lot of positive male figures in his life at all growing up, and suffered from abuse growing up. And so he really went into the hyper independence. I'm just going to work through things. I don't feel safe enough to talk about anything I'm experiencing. Even when he's diagnosed with terminal cancer, literally only expressed emotion once.
That's
and
wild.
So your story, K10, about your grandpa, like really touched me. I'm like,
wow,
what a sad reality and truth of like, it's all you know is to hold in your internal experience and just, work, play sports, do stereotypical behavioral like men stuff. My dad loved being in nature and walking the dogs and camping and all that stuff can be cool, but it's not cool when you have to hide your truth from the world because it's never felt safe enough and no one's ever modeled that for you.
And even just the words that you're using, like men might not feel safe enough. And thanks for sharing about your dad. It's got to be hard to even think about, because I think that there's so much that could be like left unsaid emotionally, right? You could share moments with people and really get deep. But I think even just the wording that you're using, not feeling safe enough, I'll have men come to me in therapy and say, I don't know how to do the emotions thing, and it's like, totally get that, understood, do you feel unsafe? And they literally sometimes can't register it. They're like, no, I'm fine physically. And I'm like, no, like, let's get deeper, because sometimes we might not realize that that's even verbiage that I wonder if men realize it's verbiage that you could use. It's so interesting to think about.
Yeah. You talking about your grandfather and you talking about your dad. Like, I remember the first time my dad like expressed an emotion to me that wasn't, happiness or anger. And there was a really bad car accident when I was a senior. One of my friends died. One of his coworkers' daughters was in the car and died, and 3 other individuals. Yeah. Thank you. And I don't remember the context, but I remember something with me. Maybe I was late for curfew and yelled like da 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 da, and I started crying. Went to my room, and like probably an hour later, he came in and he was like, "I'm sorry, I yelled, but I was so scared that something had happened to you." Because we just went through that car accident. And he was like, he said to me, he was like, I don't know how to express fear. And
wow, that's powerful.
The only time I think I saw him cry, or the first time I saw him cry, was at his dad's funeral when he was given the eulogy, which was also the summer before my senior year. But and he was modeled very much like you were describing, Justin, like, work. That's how my dad was. That's how his dad was. You go to work, you provide financially for your family. It's not emotional needs. It's, making sure there's food on the table, bills are paid, roof over the head, things like that.
Yeah. You guys are getting me to think about, like, I know we were going to talk about like healthy masculinity and like where you find models for that. And Justin, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I think you're a really great model for that. Being a therapist, being a man in this space, being really open, making it digestible, I think, for men and everybody else to be okay with expressing emotions. So I just wanted to highlight that. And I think you do that really well. And you might create a safe space for other men. And I'm wondering, is there anybody in your lives or just people that that kind of, models that you've seen for healthy masculinity?
Oh, first, I appreciate you saying that. It hasn't been easy. And I will be the first to admit, I feel more comfortable in a room of women than men. Wow. I think just being in the mental health field and being a psychologist, like, I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of other men who are in the mental health space, and it feels different. Almost like we've gone through a reprogramming. Yeah. But I'm being serious, as if it's all right. Like, you can come to me and be like, yo, I'm feeling really down today, and I'm sad or I'm disappointed. Like, language that I would never hear from my friend group of guys growing up. Like, because we literally had no models for it. Never heard someone say I'm frustrated or I'm disappointed or I'm feeling down on myself. Like I never heard that, but maybe because it's just in my head. Like right now, I'm loving watching Queer Eye. It is so good.
I love Queer Eye.
Show
Me too.
where literally all 5 of them model healthy masculinity.
Absolutely.
All of them. Yeah.
Just to justify, like, it can be easy. I love the show to death. Like, literally one of my favorite shows. But when you watch them go into spaces, they're so charismatic and connecting, and they model emotional expression like perfectly. All 5 of them do. And they are connecting with men who have 0 models for it. And you see the overwhelmingness of these men, like in the beginning of the episodes. And like every single episode ends the same, where they're like, I was really nervous at first.
Yeah.
Y'all are so expressive.
They always verbalize it. Yeah.
But you see this transformation, and I don't know how much time, in real time they get to spend, but like, I can understand there's a lot of other dynamics that like at play, of course, that I wouldn't like minimize. Like, I don't know how many of these men have someone, within the queer community that they call a friend. I recognize those could be factors as well. But just in modeling a healthy gender expression and like a full spectrum, I know so many of these men on that show have no one. And so they're seeing someone open, expressive, loud, joy, getting curious. And they're like, I've literally probably never seen this from another man before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just validate that if you watch that show and you're like, why does that man seem so like weirded out or whatever? I can just guess that maybe that man has no other model for just a healthy range of what masculinity can look like.
So true.
It was interesting that you went to Queer Eye. I love Queer Eye because when K10, you asked that question, the first 2 people that came to mind were not people I know. They're TV characters. So I don't know if you all have watched This Is Us or A Million Little Things, but in This Is Us, we have Randall and A Million Little Things, Roan, and they're 2 Black men who have their own mental health struggles. Randall has anxiety, panic attacks. Roan has depression, and it's a TV show, but I feel like both of those TV shows do so well talking about men's mental health, especially Black men's mental health, because that's another layer, but also like their internal struggles of like not wanting to reach out for help because that is what society has told them that they can't do, but then also being open and vulnerable. And especially in A Million Little Things, like Roan will reach out and encourage other people like, hey man, I was there once, or I was struggled with suicidal thoughts, things like that. And both of those shows have since ended, which makes me so sad because I felt like there's not, I don't know how you feel, and this could be a whole nother podcast episode. I find it hard to find accurate representations of mental health in TV and movies. Yeah. So when there is good ones, I'm like, why is this ending? We need more of this. We need more of this.
Exactly.
K10, do you have anybody that came to mind?
I'm trying to jog my memory, and nobody that I like really personally interact with as much. It's mostly people that I've met on TikTok, honestly. A lot of men in the mental health space, a lot of men who are like comedians as well, who are really open about their experiences. I'm even thinking of like one of my friends that I made on TikTok. His name's Davey Jax. He's a comedian, but he's also really open and vulnerable about the fact that he lived in a cult for a while and how like really horrific that was for him. And he's really open about his emotions. So I'm just thinking of people that I see on social media. And I think if there are men that are listening to this, you might find these models to be like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Or like, I'm not even close to even voicing an emotion. And the whole point isn't to get to the finish line. You have to kind of go through the process of it being clunky and weird and awkward, even just voicing an emotion. Cause I think my own partner, he's really trying to get more open and vulnerable, and he's doing a great job. And he'll be like, I'm feeling uneasy today. And I'm like, okay, cool. That was like a lot for him to say out loud. You know what I mean? So like, I'll like pray, you know what I mean? So we all start somewhere. And I just want to highlight that too. If there's anybody listening that might feel overwhelmed.
I like the idea that it makes me think like especially when you think through a cultural lens, like the ways we try to engage with men and not make it feel like flooding is important to think about. And I remember seeing a really good model of this was at Ohio State University Counseling Center, where there are ways of trying to reach out to men in particular to up their stats of welcoming men to come to mental health counseling. Like they were setting up activities that men would normally flock to, video games. Like they had like a little axe throwing thing. Like this idea that you're just going to, as I'm drinking my tea right now, shout out to my little turmeric ginger tea, great for your tummies. But this idea that you're just going to be like, dude, let's grab a little cup of tea and coffee and just sit and chat. Like, I think a lot of times we forget, like, if we're going to lead someone towards change, we do have to meet them where they're at. You might have a more of a conversation, emotional conversation, would you ever had with a man watching the sporting event or like, again, playing a sport or doing something more stereotypically that they enjoy or feel comfortable in bridging into, yo, how are you really doing? I can tell you straight up, any guy friend I've ever had, the deeper conversations have been in the golf cart, you know, on the course. Yeah. It's not sit across from each other at Starbucks, which I see. And again, everyone's different, but we're talking generalities. I see women doing this when I go to Starbucks. And I think how nice that must be. Just to sit down across from your girlfriend and they're just chatting.
Yeah.
It's just not something we're used to. But like through video games, through D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, like there's a lot of different ways as men we might engage that aren't going to be what you're used to if you're a woman trying to engage with a man.
It's a really good point.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up, Justin, because that was something I had to learn with my husband. Like I would ask questions.
Me too.
About even like when I have known that his friends have gone through something difficult, like years ago, like before we were even married, one of his friends lost his brother. And my husband was like, how do I talk to him? And I'm like, you've been friends with him way longer than I have. And he's like, I have no idea what to, and I remember like texting something out from his phone to reach out to this friend because he had no idea. Or like, I'll ask things like, you know, they're all becoming dads and things like that. And I'm like, how are your friends adjusting to fatherhood? And he's like, I don't know. We talk about sports and politics. And I'm like, you have no idea. And he's like, we don't talk about those things. Yeah. And I've just stopped asking. If I want answers, I'll usually go to like their spouses. But I love that suggestion though, of like, you know, approaching it. And that's what I've learned to do with my husband. Like, you know, hey, can I check in? Yeah, sure. I've noticed this, you know, how are you doing? And like, you know, being a psychologist, sometimes prompting like, you know, I've noticed you've been more withdrawn recently. And granted, my husband's over it. We've been together 14 and a half years. He knows how I'm going to approach it. But like, you know, but that didn't work at the beginning. Like, why stop therapizing me? Why are you saying these things? But yeah, over sports, even over beers. I know we joked about a little earlier, like it makes more sense for guys to go to the bar in the golf cart, you know, working on cars. I know I'm stating very stereotypical masculine things. True. But it is because you're engaged in something else.
Exactly.
So you're not hyper focused on the conversation.
Yeah. It probably feels like easier because there is kind of like a buffer in some way. And I don't know, I've found even like the most deep conversations I've had with my own friends to be in situations where we aren't even planning to have those deep conversations. They just kind of come up naturally. And I think you both make such a good point because I think everybody's level of like emotional expression is different too. Not only in terms of how comfortable they feel, but where they're at emotionally. Like they might not have the verbiage or the words to describe like, oh, this is what sad actually means to me. I just know that I'm feeling off or I know that I'm feeling low, you know? And everybody's level of like showing of their vulnerability is different. I had to learn that with my partner too. Cause I'm like, you know, like just like you, like a psychologist, right? I'm open, I'm vulnerable, I cry, I'll bawl my eyes out in the middle of a grocery store. Like I don't care. Right. But for other people, they're like, they might not feel comfortable expressing that. But for example, my partner was saying the other day, I can't remember what it was. He was like, yeah, I came home and I was just like I was really tired and I was just like burnt out, and he said it like that. And I was like, well, what else? And he's like, that's me being vulnerable. Like, that's a lot for me to say right now, and I'm like, okay, got it. Totally. Thank you so much. Thank you. I got it. I'm not going to push. Because I think sometimes we base somebody else's level of vulnerability on our ability to go there and what it means for us. And for men, it might just look a little different and they might not actually feel safe doing it either.
Totally. Yeah. As you were saying that, I was reflecting on like the most meaningful conversations like I ever had with my brother were on the chairlift snowboarding. Like you couldn't be anywhere else. You weren't facing each other.
You couldn't escape.
You're just sitting there like this, freezing your ass off. If you ski or you snowboard, you know. But like you're just sitting there, and that's when we would like just kind of shoot the shit. And I would learn what's going on in his life. How much does he hate his work? What's actually going on in his relationship? But it's like that the setup of just like facing head on, like we're just going to spill the beans, which I get why the whole setup of psychotherapy feels like against everything a lot of us men are taught. I'm just going to waltz in here. Someone's going to stare at me and be like, what the hell is wrong with you? And they won't even be that direct. You know what I mean? Someone did say, what the hell is wrong with you? That might actually be a little more familiar.
Can you imagine if psychotherapists see us? We'd be out of jobs. Like,
fire. Our malpractice insurance would have to be a lot higher.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But K10, something you were saying a few moments ago about like, vulnerability, emotional expression, and might show up differently. And reflecting back on something you asked earlier about like models in our lives, I also wonder, do men that were never modeled how to show different emotions truly know how to label or what those emotions feel like? Like, do we know what depression looks like? Or am I just irritable and angry because I know how to express that? Am I experiencing anxiety, or is this something I just have to like shake off? Or like, everybody might feel this way? And we know that if people don't talk about, certain things, mental health disorders, certain emotions, anything, we might not even have the language to do so. So if a man, or as a little boy, is modeled like anger and stoicism, if they're struggling with anxiety, but have never been shown that, they might not even know they're experiencing anxiety.
Yeah.
Or what to call it, at least. They know something, they feel internally something's off, but I don't know, nobody else is saying that they feel this way.
The labels, yeah. I try to teach my nephews whenever I see them. I try to have like those little moments of like, where do you feel it in your body? What word? Describe how you feel. He's 3. He's 3 years old. I'm like, find a description. I'm showing the feelings wheel. Pick one. He's like, red. I'm like, better than nothing. Cool.
We all feel red.
It's my favorite color.
There's somewhere where I feel red in my body, and he knows it. I'm like, as long as you could identify a little man, we're cool.
I think that's so true. And I also just think another aspect is just how men are just taught to be hyper independent. It's just, there's so many examples where it's not just a suck it up, but it's also like a figure it the fuck out. Which is just it's a different texture of you're supposed to know. You're supposed to just figure it out. Like, it's not celebrated like, yo, I went to this person and they helped me, and it was like almost like a team or community build. I learned most of that through going to grad school by being surrounded mostly by women. Like, that's where I learned more about community building, connection, helping each other than I had at any other chapter of my life. And I've had tons of great men in my life, but it's just a whole other aspect of like, and we could go deep into sporting McSportsters, but like even in common team sports, like it can be like, I just got done watching NBA playoffs, but it's like, why didn't Jimmy Butler take over the games? Like he needed to take, I'm sporting McSporting for 1 second here, but Jimmy Butler had to take over the game to extend the series, and he didn't do it. And it's like, I'm thinking, I'm like, this is a team sport. There's four other
it's not
guys
just
on the
him.
court. Yeah. But it's just, it's weird, even that aspect. It kind of makes me wonder, like, as women, like, does it feel similar? Are you taught, like, it's okay to, like, collaborate? Because I just feel like as men, we're just not.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I think it's almost like I think there's mixed messaging for women, and I could be wrong, and this is just my own personal experience, but I think it's have emotions, but don't have too many of them, have emotions, but make sure it's not intense, and have emotions, but make sure you could still show up. So I think it's like there's the permission, in my opinion, but the expression, you have to kind of like be wary of where you are and how it might impact things or how serious people take you. But if I'm really thinking deeply, I mean, I think with men, it almost feels like there's no permission to feel. And I could be wrong. With women, I think that there is permission to feel, but conditionally based on society. Just, I don't know how you feel about it.
No, I completely agree with your sentiments. I think we're definitely taught it's okay to feel, but not too much, or only in certain situations. Like, I mean, I don't know if you all heard this, but back when like Hillary Clinton was running for president, I heard so many things like, we can't have a women president. Women are too emotional. And it's like, things like that. So I think we're allowed to show emotions, and I think it is more normalized, but like not too much. Or even like the way I know I mentioned arrogance, and then Justin, you reframed it as confidence. Like confidence, I don't know if that's technically an emotion. I guess it could be. In men, it's seen as like really attractive. But if women show confidence, it's like, oh, you're like full of yourself. And that's not. So I think it's also like different emotions that we're allowed to express. But if a woman expresses anger, she's a bitch, or depending on her race or ethnicity, there's a stereotype there. So I think generally speaking, we're allowed to express emotions, but there are limits on it.
I mean, I think all the time about politics in general, and like, especially here in America, why does nothing get done? And I go back to what I was talking about a moment ago of like, men are taught largely not to collaborate, not to be part of the team. It's what I did. And I think about with so much policy making and things like this, there has to be so much collaboration and internalizing people with different perspectives. And I'm just like, I'm like losing my words a little bit, because I didn't have many examples of that. It was like, how can you be that dude or the guy or the person that did it, like, and you take credit?
Yeah,
it's just there's not a lot of room for collaboration.
Yeah. I'm thinking back to all the group projects I had, and I'm trying to think who was carrying the team. And I don't want to out anybody here, but it was usually a gal, like doing all the assignments, submitting them on time. We're all just kind of like not group think, whatever. We're just kind of social loafing, like whatever, cool. No big deal. But I think you make a really good point, because I think of it this way too. Even in like, I have a bunch of men in my life who are really big in business, right? And they have really big business endeavors, and it is a lot about, hey, our company and like what we're doing, but there's only like one or two of them, right? Kind of. And when you collaborate, it almost feels weird for them. At least this is just the observation on my end, because I don't know what it's like. But Justin, I'm with you. I think you're onto something there. Whereas women, I think that we tend to collaborate when we feel safe enough to do so, but we certainly collaborate a little more than men, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
You know, it's one part we let Jess not collaborate on.
Not collaborate on.
That's something. See, Justin, you're making your point. You could have volleyed it over. I would have caught it, and I would have had your back. Like,
it is not collaborative.
Jess just grabbing the Google Scholar shorts and running with it.
You all volunteered me. We collaborated and decided that I was going to do this.
We
kind of voluntold.
Actually, no, Justin said I was going to do that. Now I'm going back to the independent. This was all your idea. It's great, though.
It was a discussion.
There was a discussion.
That's what we'll process later on.
I didn't really fight it, though. I was like, okay, whatever, Jess.
Yes. Google Scholar Shorts. Okay. So obviously we're talking about men's mental health, and I dropped a stat earlier that men are 4 times more likely than women to die by suicide. So I'm going to ask you all, what specific risk or protective factors do you believe impacted men's suicide during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Oh, risk or protective factors?
Yeah, you can do either.
I just go back to I don't know if this is a myth or a fact. Maybe one of you know that men use more lethal means when they contemplate or complete suicide. So I would say that's a risk factor. I don't know. Social support network, being able to like talk openly, maybe that's also a risk factor if they're not talking. I don't know.
Any thoughts, Justin?
I think maybe the protective factor would be used to being isolated or like doing things on their own or not.
That's a good one.
Like, I just don't think, again, in that it's hyper independence. Yeah. That part of COVID would be like, just doing my own thing. Screw that team at work. Like,
Okay. So this is a 2023 study that examined risk and protective factors of suicidal ideation. So some protective factors they found: residing in a metropolitan area, maintaining employment throughout the pandemic, higher levels of social support, and higher levels of resilience. So those were all protective against suicidal ideation. Greater odds of ideation were observed for individuals who were separated, divorced, or widowed compared to married or partnered men. And then more suicidal ideation was found among men engaging in emotion-focused or avoidance coping.
Wow. Part of me's like not shook, but part of me like realizes how deep this is. It's like,
what was that last point again? Say that again. I think
so ideation was higher among men who engaged in either emotion focus or avoidance coping. So if they were coping with their emotions or using avoidance to cope. So substance abuse, for example, is one I think of. They had higher suicidal ideation.
I'm trying to think of like what the emotion focus would be, because part of me is like, wait, say that another way. So if like,
maybe emotion focus, and I'm jumping off the cuff, Jess, so I don't know if this is right, but emotion focus meaning like acting on one of those surface level emotions like anger, irritability, or whatever, and like not going deeper and doing like mindfulness sort of strategies. I didn't read the study though, so I don't know.
So like emotion focus coping, like it could be like trying to reduce or eliminate the emotions.
Gotcha.
Associated with a stressor. Avoidance is obviously avoiding the stressor.
Yeah.
I was kind of thrown off, and it took me time to process. But
part of me was like, wait, is it saying that men who really were like expressing their emotions had higher ideation? I was like, wait a second.
Oh, I see where you're going with it then.
Yeah,
okay.
No,
that makes
it's
sense.
more
that
like if you're trying to reduce, eliminate the emotions.
Got it.
I think it's choice of
proactive coping. Mm-hmm.
Got it. Yeah,
that choice of wording.
Problem-focused coping is when you try to like tackle the problem head on. So like, I'll give a random example. Like, since maintaining employment was a protective factor, if a man were to lose their job and they were feeling really distressed about it, emotion-focused coping would be trying to deal with that distress by like reducing it, eliminating it, like getting rid of that emotion rather than actually addressing the problem. Okay, maybe I should find a new job. Maybe I should, reach out to friends for referrals and things like that. That was an example in the study, but avoidance coping made sense. But no, when I read that, I was like, that's interesting.
It's like we want emotions, but I know you. Yeah. We also want the polls.
We do.
We do want the polls.
Let's roll.
Always.
All right. So I was in charge of polls this week, and y'all had some great insights. So the first is 1 in blank men experience anxiety or depression in their lifetime. The answers were 5, 4, 10, or 8. 1 in 5, 1 in 4, 1 in 10, or 1 in 8 men.
Based off the stat Justin dropped, I'm going to say 1 in 5.
Okay,
I'm
Justin, what do you
thinking
think?
it's a little higher, 1 in 4. I actually don't know.
So most people responded with 1 in 4. That's 45%. It's actually 1 in 10, which I was shocked at that stat too. Yeah, I'll send you the article so that we could put it in the notes. But I was shocked too. I thought it was 1 in 4, but yeah, 1 in 10.
But I guess you said just depression and anxiety, right?
Just depression or anxiety, or
So, I
anxiety.
mean,
so one or the other.
Just thinking of some of the stats that we dropped earlier, like schizophrenia, substance use disorders. I mean, we're not including all the spectrum of mental health concerns.
Valid.
So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
But that's also based on men reporting it.
Yeah, I know. The reporting is always the hiccup of like, how do you, it's under, it's always going to be,
it's always under.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whenever I see stats, I always like want to trust it, but then I'm like, how many people actually reported what they were experiencing?
Yeah.
Okay, the next one was, what would you tell a man in your life struggling with depression? These literally brought me to tears earlier, so I'm going to try to hold it together. So there's so much strength in getting the support to help you through. You're not a failure, and it's okay. Asking for help is a sign of strength. I'm always here for you. You're not alone. Your feelings are valid. You're not your thoughts. I'm here for you. We'll get through this. There was a lot of like collaborative experiences, like we're in this together. Go freaking talk to someone, man. It was so sweet. I thought that was so cute.
I feel like a man said that to another man.
I think so.
Yeah,
I am making an assumption right there, but I feel like just Justin, going off the direct thing you said about like walking into therapy, like, what's wrong with you? Like, go freaking talk to someone, man.
Brother.
Just go freaking talk to someone.
Justin wrote that one.
I did.
It's okay to cry. It's okay to indulge in quote unquote feminine self-care. I know we talked about gendered experiences before. It's okay to not be okay. So there was like literally so many.
Lovely.
Like I'm still scrolling. There were so many. So I think maybe we can make a post about it.
We should.
Yeah. The next one is Jess gave it away. So if y'all have been listening to the podcast up until this point, you will get this correct. One of the leading causes of disability in America is schizophrenia. Approximately 3.5 million people in the U.S. have been diagnosed, and blank percent of those who are diagnosed by 30 are men. 20, 30,
90.
50, or 90. Okay. Yeah, 90 is right. Most of our group members said 30, though, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And I shared this with you all before we hit record. Like, before I saw that, I knew it was high, but I thought it was going to be like 70.
I thought it was the majority, but I wouldn't even thought, I would think 60 something. Yeah. 90. I would never.
Like, I can't think, I mean, there's probably another, like, but I can't think of another disorder that's probably 90. Maybe borderline personality, because it is stigmatized as a women's disorder.
Yeah,
I mean, but like, I don't even know if it's even 90 though.
Even insomnia is like, it's mostly women. Like it's 50%, people who have anxiety are twice as likely to experience, I don't know. You want to say hi for Men's Mental Health Forum?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Dave.
We're popping bottles.
Yes, Dave. That's what we do as men.
He said
We're popping bottles.
Hey, there we go.
He goes, hey, there we go.
All right, bye.
Perfect example of men interacting with men.
Literally, like, yo, man, what's up?
It was just so casual, popping bottles. Like, that was the most casual dude interaction of all time.
It's like, and he couldn't hear because I have the headphones in, so he's probably like assuming that you would think or say the same thing. So that's so interesting.
Totally.
Anyway, naturalistic observation at its finest. Okay, the next one for the polls. Why do you think it's so hard for men to ask for help with mental health? Ooh. And again, there were so many amazing, incredible responses. Y'all had me crying in the club today with these. A sad perpetuation of an image. No, I was in the club means my bed, crying a little bit, but like 33. A sad perpetuation to uphold an image, warriors and providers. Society promotes a pull up by your bootstrap mentality, kind of like what we talked about before. Some of the unique ones were shitty stigma, traditional gender roles, toxic masculinity. There was a lot about toxic masculinity, which I know we talked about masculinity, but not so much like toxic masculinity. Maybe we did a little bit, but a lot of people put ego, pride, and culture. So those were like a lot of the big ones, and how vulnerability is hard for men. And those were the polls. Thank y'all.
I love it.
Love those.
Know what else we love? Our group member questions, though.
We do. We just do.
I am so excited. I feel like K10. I get excited every time I get to do the questions, but
I'm never gonna. If I have the worst day of my life, I'm still gonna be excited to do the group member questions.
Peak living.
Yeah. So you all had such good questions. So the first, there's like a group of questions. So I just want to give a shout out to all of these individuals, but it's really all about how can individuals support the men in their lives. I know we already talked about, but like Rabon from Iowa, said our communication relationship has improved with marriage counseling. How can I further encourage my husband to express his emotions and feel safe in being vulnerable? Cindy from Brooklyn, says, how can I empower my husband and allow him to feel good about what he is doing for his mental health, seeing a therapist? India from the USA says she has a lot of friends struggling with their mental health who are men. What are ways to support them? And Hallie from California, how do I support my husband getting into therapy? So I know we already kind of talked about some ways of supporting, but we got so many questions around that. So I just wanted to open the discussion about different ways we can support men in our lives.
Yeah, just echoing what I was saying before, because I really want to double and triple down on it. Any man in your life, it's important to meet them where they're at. Like, and again, thinking about how you could create a safe space to engage with them, and how that could likely be through one of their favorite activities. Whether that's doing yard work, going for a drive, like what, I mean, you know, the men in your life, you know, the things that maybe stereotypically they like to do. Meeting them in those spaces is important. Like, I think it's something that often goes overlooked. We're just expecting that, you know, our father figure, grandpa, or somebody just to be like sitting across from you at that dinner table and just spilling the beans. And I'm telling you, it's less likely than if you go to the baseball game with him. Like, I think there's certain environments and settings where people will feel more apt to bridge over to being like more emotional and open. And then again, my other little add on to that is just be wary of what you say to men that might stereotype. And I know we'll talk about toxic masculinity in a moment, but be wary of the things that you say that might push them towards that. Validate, tell them, again, it's normal to have the full range of emotions. We know everyone's feeling them. And again, any messaging that, like, I just see it a lot. I just see a lot of messaging on social media where people, you'll see whether it's a man dancing or just dressing up in certain characters or whatever. And you find those comments where people are just like digging at them or like mocking or like just any sort of judgment where it's like they're having any sort of like openness with their gender expression.
So true.
And that's on all of us, men, women, anyone. It's on all of us to be mindful of how you interact with people.
I love that. I really love how you describe it too, because I think it's in such a non-threatening way. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of times when I've talked to men about emotional expression, vulnerability, emotional reciprocity, just kind of showing up emotionally and putting it in air quotes, there's a lot of fear, I think, of like, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to do the right thing? Like, I don't even know how to word this. I don't feel comfortable even going there right now. And sometimes, again, I'm a woman saying this, so it might not apply for everybody. But what I've done with my own, the men in my family, I would say something like, what feels comfortable to say right now? And what feels even a little bit borderline uncomfortable, whatever that is, you know, and then almost like creating that open space and holding space like you would for someone, like a friend, a girlfriend going through something. Just because they don't say it doesn't mean they don't feel it. And I always try to keep that in the back of my head when I talk with men, is like, I'm probably getting tip of the iceberg, and that's okay, because that's all they could do right now.
I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts with regard to the question specifically about encouraging going to therapy or like continuing therapy. And I mean, the first kind of step I think about is, do they want to go to therapy? If they do, talking about what are your hesitations? What are your concerns? And really this applies to anybody, but I think for men, figuring out, do you want another male therapist? Do you actually feel safer with a female therapist? Like, who are are there individuals in your life that you do feel more comfortable opening up to? And what makes you feel more comfortable opening up to them? If it is a partner, like, would they feel comfortable with you going with them to the first session? Do they want to do it all on their own? Do they want your help? Because, I think back to our episode last week with Dr. John and him like therapist shopping, and he swore that, another gay man was going to be the therapist for him. And it was actually an older lady. But if there is an idea of who would make you feel more comfortable, and Justin, to reflect on something you said earlier, like you are more comfortable in a room of women. So what type of, therapist would they want? What messages have they been given about therapy? Could they even, social media is a wonderful thing for many reasons. Find male therapists. I'm going to use you, Justin, like Justin or other individuals on social media talking about mental health and therapy that would make them feel more comfortable if they don't have people in their lives to, model that. But also taking it at their own pace because they might say, I recognize I need therapy, but then if they're not following through or resistant to help, there's probably some shame, stigma, internalized messaging that they have to work through first. So starting that discussion. Hey, I noticed you mentioned you want to get therapy, but you kind of haven't been looking, or when I bring it up, you say you'll get to it later. I just wanted to see how you're feeling about it. Are you regretting it? Kind of exploring that and the baby steps that we've already talked about. Yeah. Do it while you're golfing or working on the car.
No, for sure.
Things like that. Okay. So what we've been talking about that we were going to talk about soon, Harry from Maryland asks, I hear about this term toxic masculinity all the time. What is it?
Go for it, K10.
No.
Yeah, you want to do it?
I want you to do it.
What?
You got it.
All right.
Because I feel like I'm not going to describe. I have examples. I don't have like a definition, if that makes sense.
You'll back me up is what I'm hearing.
Of course I'll back you up.
Collaborate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Collaborate.
The way I think about it is just behaving in a stereotypical, like traditional masculine way. So like we talked about, very limited, like some of the messaging I think of is man up, suck it up, like figure it out. And the ripple effect of living in this box of like how it comes out in relationships. I must take control. I must not express my emotions. I must be the one making the decisions. These are the roles I do. Like it ends up putting everybody in a box, but it's also like stereotypical. Like I must have the answers. I must have control. I must have power. I must not show weakness. Like again, stereotypical message after stereotypical message, which if this is what's been modeled for you as men, it causes, I'm sure your mind is expanding. It causes problems in every area of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I even think too, I mean, when I hear the term toxic masculinity, I know it has like a negative connotation, but I also think it's men's inability to like address or even acknowledge their emotions and how that might be impacting their behavior. Because I think sometimes men might act out in ways, right? Like you're describing, Justin, and they might not even like, I've even had men in my life be like, I don't even know why I did that. You know what I mean? Because they're just not really connecting the emotional experience. And I think when I think of toxic masculinity, I do think about, hey, if he knew exactly maybe why he was doing it, or maybe the deeper reason or the deeper emotion, that might come out differently. So I think sometimes it is this awareness of emotions too, but with toxic masculinity, it might be like, oh, screw that. I'm just going to do what I want to do, sort of thing.
Well, and Justin, you mentioned the ripple effect. And I think that's what I think of a lot, not only the like stereotypical masculine behaviors, but like it's toxic because it's negative. Like there's a negative impact, not only on men, but women, society, you know, the people around them, the interactions, because it wouldn't be toxic if it was healthy. And like, I think it's important to highlight masculinity within itself is not inherently toxic. It's when it's those messages of just suck it up when the only emotion you're allowed to express is anger, when it's dominance, when we resort to violence to handle situations, asserting power in a negative way. Like that's what I think of, because I think a lot of people with everything with social media can kind of take these pop culture terms and misconstrue them. Like not all masculinity is bad by any means. It's when it's that like black and white messaging, and it doesn't allow men to express the full spectrum of their masculinity in many ways.
Totally. Yeah. And I think of all the context that this happens, not to bring up a totally but related topic, talking about corporal punishment with children, but it's like with men, it's like if what they're taught is just like there is to show your dominance is to be physical. Like, don't let someone talk back to you, like show you're stronger or tougher. It's like, how then do we model, like even in like, if in the business world or whatever world where people need to collaborate or connect or like find middle ground, it's like, where is that taught? When it's like a lot of things that coaches might teach you of like, get after him, or like, I'm remembering a lot of messages I got playing literally all the sports growing up. It's like, there was no modeling of talk it out, see if you can both express, find middle ground, hear the other person. Nobody said that crap to like nobody said it. But then it's like, how then are you supposed to get all this messages at 7, 9, 13, 16, and then you're 18 years old and you're supposed to just act totally different than all that messaging you've gotten? So just, at least to draw some lines of like, where does it come from?
Yeah. I love that you mentioned that, because I think we don't, I don't know, and I'm talking generalities here, I don't think we give men enough credit for the things that they're not taught. And I think that that really, really, really impacts communication, relationships, masculinity, all that.
Totally.
I definitely agree. So Abigail from the USA says, often in the news and reports, we see men with a higher violent crime rate. What are your thoughts on the idea that this may be a result of suppressed mental health concerns? Not dismissing a crime or illegal acts. However, what if this number is high because they feel they have no way to seek help due to stigma, and it's the easy way out or to get help?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I'm thinking just off the cuff here. I don't have any research to support this, but I do wonder if there's this like, it's easier for men to act out or get angry or act on their irritability or anger or that like surface level emotion because that feels safe. And of course it's not safe for everybody else if there's crime, right? But for them, it might feel like this is the way. Whereas if they were to kind of like voice that they might be feeling fearful or something like that, I mean, maybe their behaviors would be different, because we know, just if I'm thinking from a CBT perspective, our thoughts and emotions guide our behavior sometimes. So that might be part of it.
So my thoughts went two different ways. So thinking back to just talking about toxic masculinity and like needing power, control, dominance, and thinking of like crimes of like sexual assault, crimes against women, things like that. I wonder if, even if it's not like a true mental health concern, once again, not negating any of this, but the messaging of like needing power, control, things like that. The other thought that came to mind, I have worked with a number of individuals in the hospital for gang-related violence, gunshot wounds, and there is not a single individual I've worked with that does not have a significant trauma history.
Wow.
Like horrific traumas that I don't condone gang violence in any means, but
Sure.
I can understand why they end up in the situations they are in,
Of course.
given their history. And so whether they meet criteria for PTSD or something else, I mean, trauma within itself is not a mental health diagnosis, but we know traumatic events can lead to an array of mental health concerns. So, and I mean, I even like think about, I don't work in prisons. I've never worked in prisons, but the few friends I have, they talk about the significant mental health concerns of criminals.
I did forensics for a little bit and I lasted 3 months. And yeah, I mean, every person that I talked to do those evaluations, their childhoods were absolutely horrific. Like I couldn't, I wouldn't be, I just wouldn't be able to fathom going through things like that, you know? And it's like you said, Jess, it doesn't negate the propensity of the crime and maybe what they're doing, of course. But I think some people they are stuck in environment, situations, societal norms, whatever it is that creates this pathway for them. And it's really difficult to escape, you know? And I think it really impacts things.
Totally. I know even on not necessarily a traumatic level, again, I go back to our kids, our teens, and just go ask a man in your life. Like go ask any man in your life and be like, if somebody wronged you when you're 13, 14, 15, 16, if they wronged you, what were you taught you should do about that? I know no man who was taught to use vulnerability and say,
Their
hey,
words. Yeah.
Exactly. And their words to name, hey, I feel hurt, belittled, pushed aside by what you said or did to me. Like, I know there's got to be a man listening to me say that right now, and they're laughing. They're laughing because they're imagining themselves. And I am too, being 13 years old. I'd be like, but like, let's zoom out from this example. How the hell are 18, 19, 20, 22? How are they supposed to act? They had no model for that. And then what they were taught through society and TV and movies was it's violence and dominance. We're all part of the problem.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, there's a part of me that gets frustrated sometimes. Like, listen, everyone deserves some criticism and self-reflection. There's plenty of men who don't partake in that. And again, they need to be called out. But I get frustrated sometimes when I scroll social media. I see people digging into men. And it's like, until you understand where the problem comes from and that it's part of society, culture, TV, movies, it's ingrained in you at a young age, you calling out some 20-year-old and just bashing him teaches him nothing. And I do get frustrated because, again, we all need to be critical and have the ability to self-reflect. But I also think in a lot of ways I see people just laughing or mocking young men on social media. I'm like, you are now putting them more in a box where they're only going to resort to the few tools they have versus welcoming them to try something different. And it does. It makes me so frustrated when I see this on social media.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, I think of it too, like I know we're probably going to go on to the next question, but I think the more that we push that narrative, like you said, the less that they're going to want to actually be open. And then it's going to cause even more issues, like with themselves and maybe relationships, or if they have kids, you know, like you said, the ripple effect. I'm just thinking of the ripple effect right now.
So Tracy from New York asked, I've heard that suicide looks different in men. Can you talk about this? I can take this one since I researched suicide. I mean, we already talked about the stats, and K10 you brought up. So suicide is higher, completed suicide is higher in men because men tend to use more lethal means. So gunshot wounds, hanging are the two most researched, compared to women, which are more likely to use less lethal means such as overdose. Obviously, these are generalizations. But going back to something that Justin said, if men are 2 times less likely to seek out mental health treatment than women, they're also not going to get the support. They're not going to get help earlier. So usually when men make a suicide attempt or complete suicide, they have probably been struggling alone for a very, very long time versus, say, a woman. And I know we're talking within the binary. Unfortunately, a lot of the research is on the binary with regard to this. We could talk about LGBTQ plus stats, but women, if they're in therapy, they may be able to disclose, hey, I'm having suicidal thoughts, get more intensive treatment, make a safety plan, things like that. So really the main difference is the more lethal means. We also know from research, suicides tend to happen more frequently if looking at men, like older men, so post-retirement age. If we think of things that we've been talking about already, with kind of independence, kind of the stereotypical gender roles, once men retire, if they have been given messages that their purpose in life is to provide for their family, if they have one, and make money, their purpose is
now what? Yeah.
Gone. We also know from research that men that are partnered tend to have higher satisfaction in their life, like just higher life satisfaction overall. If you think about older men, if their life partner has passed away, not only do they not have a job, they are now isolated, alone, going back to everything Justin was saying about like men bonding with men. They're not going to have that same level of vulnerability. So higher rates of suicide as well. So Amanda from Nova Scotia says, my best friend and coworker is under a lot of stress in his life. The last few weeks, he's been more irritable, tired, distracted, really low mood, says he's fine. Anytime I ask him, he's stoic. I'm afraid he'll shut down. How do I approach the conversation that I'm worried he might be depressed? How do I show him I'm supporting him without pushing him away? And I know we've talked about kind of ways of supporting, but this was like very specific to if we see somebody, a man in our life who is struggling.
I don't know him personally, obviously, right? So these are generalities, but I do think like that conversation might be hard, but if he's showing overt signs, I always think you're getting tip of the iceberg. You're not really getting the whole spectrum, but I always try to ask people, let's go have fun. Like, let's go do something fun. Like if you know that he likes pickleball or bowling or whatever, you might say like, hey, I'm going this weekend. Would love if you would be there, whatever, get him out of the house maybe. And you might not have that conversation, but he kind of knows that you're there. If you want to take like a more direct approach, maybe doing something with him one-on-one and then having that conversation potentially. But I think it's hard to know what people actually need and if they feel comfortable enough to say it, especially men. So
yeah, I do think it's okay to ask. Like, I think there is a place where we can broach and name it, like, I'm noticing, I just saw a shift in you that you seem more tired and not quite yourself. Like, I want you to know that I'm thinking about you. And like, do you want to chill together? Do you want to do something together? Almost like broaching into the activity of like, I'm here for you if you want to spend some time. Because I think there can be ways that we can name what we're observing and broach to a more comfortable setting as well.
Okay, so Nick from Colorado says, something I and several of my friends who identify as men struggle with is making sure their confidence does not turn into arrogance, which is often complicated by the mixed messages flying around on social media and the internet in general. What are some ways that men can tell if they're being healthily confident or if they're becoming arrogant? I love this question.
Well, that's a really good one. Were you going to say something, Justin?
No, you go.
Great. Okay. I'm thinking when it comes to arrogance, when you're arrogant, I tend to think of it like you think that you're better than others, whereas confidence, you know that you're pretty good at your skills, even with other people doing their best too. So it's kind of like what Justin was talking about, like that collaboration thing. Like I can be confident, somebody else can be confident, we're good. When there's arrogance, it's like almost like this one-upping approach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nail on the head of exactly what I was thinking. I think confidence can still welcome in other people, their perspective, their thoughts, and you can still be confident in what you bring to the table. But arrogance to me, as soon as I hear it or I picture it out there in the wild, it's shutting others down. It's exactly what K10 said. It's I'm above, like what you have to offer isn't as good as me. And confidence does not have to include that at all. You can be totally be confident in your intellect and your charisma and your creativity and make plenty of space for other people and hype them up as well.
Yeah, I echo everything you say. And like when I think about it, I think of confidence as something internal to you, does not depend on other people. Arrogance is a comparison. So, confidence would be like, I know that I am really good at my job. Arrogance is I am better than everybody else at my job. It's kind of how I think of it. Like, because you're going to feel confident in yourself and your abilities regardless of who is around you. Arrogance requires that like air of comparison.
I love it.
So Trey from unknown location asks, why is anger the only emotion I'm allowed to show in this world? If I cry, I'm called a baby, but if I show anger and rage, that's okay. I'm literally tearing up. Trey, we see you.
I can't answer. I'm going to cry. Somebody else take it. Fuck.
Trey, I feel you. I know, just not to like make it about me, but like after my dad died for a year, and I've talked about this before, but the only emotion I expressed that whole year was anger and rage. And everyone around me at that time period knew me that way. It's so sad because like I wasn't that way before my dad passed, and I'm certainly not that way today. But like everyone, my nickname's Juddy, but everyone just knew me like Angry Juddy. Like anything would piss me off, I would rage, I would fight. Like it's wild to think about that. And under that, I was just in the thick of grief of like my dad died of brain cancer on winter break, my sophomore year. And I literally went back that spring semester as if nothing had happened. And that entire year, spring, summer, into fall, I literally just raged, angry. Anything could happen. And I was like ready to fight. It's all I knew. And Trey, I'm sorry, man. Like, I'm sorry that this is the box that we get put in, that we go through some of the most difficult things all of us as humans do. And the only thing we know to turn to is just raging and being angry. It's awful. And I know no one wants us to be here. Women, non-binary people, nobody wants men to be in this. And I go back to what I said, it's on all of us to widen the scope of what masculinity looks like and not say it's one way, whether it's in sports, in work, in friendships, in anything. But that's a societal change.
Justin, thank you for sharing that. And one thing that stuck out to me, and I'm making an assumption here so you can like share as much or a little, but the fact that like your nickname was Angry Jetty, like it was like so normalized that was no, but like really like, oh, it's just Angry Jetty. Like, like nothing like, and I don't know, people might have reached out to you like, hey man, you okay? But it was just like, oh, it's Angry Jetty. That's how I'm imagining it happened. I don't know if that's how it happened, but
like, this isn't putting anything on any of them. So if any of my old friends are listening or my friends, like they did. And it was like once, it was like right when I got back, people were like, sorry, dude. Like, and that was it. But that's all they knew. Like, how can I expect more from, a 20-year-old young man who's never been talked about emotion or vulnerability? My dad just died. What do I expect them to do for me? Like, I'm asking them to speak a foreign language that they don't even know. But so no one besides immediately, they're like, dude, I'm sorry. Like, and I agree. Like, it's so wild because a semester before that, someone else in my friend group's dad died. I said the same shit. I was like, dude,
that's
man.
how you guys knew. Yeah.
Sorry. That's it. I never brought it up again until after my dad had died and we bonded over that. But I'm like, it's like you're asking someone to speak a foreign language they've never been taught. So it's like, I don't blame any of them, but they're just comfortable with me being angry and not diving into what's behind that.
they may have not even, like, you made such a good point because it's getting me to really think, like, they may have not even known, like, how to even initiate.
No way.
Like, you know what I mean?
They
Like,
didn't.
how do you say it? How do you be like, yo, man, like, you get deep, like, or even like asking for permission, like, hey, it's okay if you cry, like, none of that. Like, how are you supposed to know?
None.
Yeah.
And I know death can be that topic for a lot of us, but when you multiply that of like 0 models of men talking about emotion, and it's like with grief, it's like you will experience every emotion with grief, everyone. And yes, anger, frustration is a part of that, the bargaining, but like just sadness, depression, just the loneliness, like every aspect. And it just shows its head better than any other scenario where it's like, as men dealing with grief, it's like, you're like, I got no tools, nothing.
It's so wild. Yeah. Me and my brother were talking about grief a while ago because my grandpa is like the man figure in my life. Right. So when he passed away, I reached out to my brother and I was like, yo, are you good? And he's like, don't psychoanalyze me. I'm like, I'm putting that aside. I'm just here for you as another human. And even he was like, I just don't even know what I'm feeling. Yeah. Like, I don't even, like, I expected this, but I'm pissed and I'm sad and I don't have the words for it. Cause I was asking what he needed. He's like, I don't even know what I need. Like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, he's been lost. So you're right. There's the resources and other men. I mean, y'all are really just trying to figure it out all together, which is why I'm really happy that we're talking about it today. Cause I think, like you said, scrolling TikTok and just seeing all this rhetoric about how men don't show up. And like, of course there is a subset of men out there that, show up this way. So I don't want to overlook that. Yeah. And there are these elements of toxic masculinity and power and control and all of that. But most of the men that I engage with are like, hey, I just don't even know how to label my fucking emotions. And that's about it. Like, don't know how to talk about it. Absolutely. So I'm really happy that you shared.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So Micah from Colorado asks, are trans men more likely to come to therapy than a cisgender man? Does anybody know? I don't
know this stats. I just know that trans... Go ahead, Jess. You probably know more about this than I do, actually. At least from my trans clients, they'll tell me, like, at least trans men will say, like, I didn't even feel safe enough to come to therapy. So, but I don't know if it's the same as cis men.
Yeah. So I tried, because obviously I was doing the group member questions and I saw this one and I was like, I don't know. So
like, let me find the stats.
No, that's what I tried to do. So there was a 2019 study that found that cisgender and transgender individuals, they did not split between men and women, were just as likely to seek mental health care. But then I found this interesting stat from a 2015 US trans survey that said 58% of trans individuals have received therapy. So if we're thinking about stats that Justin shared, about like 25% of women, about 13% of men, you would think statistically speaking. And then I was thinking from a like healthcare access. So we have on the one hand, there's not as many gender affirming providers. We can encourage our group members to go back to last week's episode to hear more about that. But then on the flip side, to receive hormones, surgery, things like that, usually therapy is a required part of treatment. I would also argue that trans men may be more likely to seek therapy depending on when they start their transition because they were socialized as females.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I've heard that from trans men in my life and also trans masculine clients that because they were socialized female, they were taught to express emotions more readily. But Micah, unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of research on that thus far. But I did want to highlight that question, kind of tying in our two discussions from
that was great, Jess.
This week and last week. So Sean from Oregon, and this is more of a statement, but Justin, you brought this up earlier, so I wanted to highlight it and so we could talk about it. When talking to male patients, many say they prefer, or how many say that they prefer company and friendship from women over men because they don't feel like they can be themselves around men, that they have to feel like they put on a macho, unfeeling mask. So I realize it now is a question. I read it wrong originally. So, but Justin, you shared that you feel more comfortable around men. I don't know with patients that you all have had with clients, have any expressed that?
I don't have this stat. I just think if there's more men out there who feel like me, it would make sense, because you don't know in a group of men how restrictive the expression is. You don't know. But I know in general, the expression being around women is larger. It's more expansive. Emotionally expressing, like, again, just a more freer expression across the gender expression, whether it's with playfulness, dress, emotionality. Like, around women, I just feel more likely to be accepted than with men. It feels riskier, and it feels like you're breaking status quo. I don't have any stats, and I know this leads into a great conversation I used to have at my college counseling center when I was group coordinator of, should the men's support group have co-leaders who are women? And I was a big advocate for absolutely yes, because I think the presence of just the full spectrum, women and anyone, welcomes in a larger conversation about masculinity. And there are many people there who thought that there should be no co-leaders or anyone who are women or non-binary or anything. And I thought that was a huge mistake. But it's a conversation, and a lot of things are nuanced. But I'm a firm believer that you don't assume men feel comfortable around men. I just feel like when I'm in a group of men, it's easier to fall back into sort of the box and stereotype. And even as somebody who tries very hard to model a fuller expression.
So I'm reflecting, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking about outpatient caseload, because in the hospital, it's different. And most of the individuals I'm seeing there are for chronic illness. And for some reason, people are able, especially thinking of my like male teenage clients, because I never know how that's going to go. If they're like, yeah, I'm anxious or depressed because I'm in the hospital, it's easier to talk about, but most of them don't follow up. Reflecting on my current caseload, I don't know if I have a single boy, man, mask individual that is not trans, non-binary, or somewhere LGBTQ plus, because I was trying to go through, and I'm like, actually, and the ones I can think of, like, yeah, they have a mix of guy friends, they have a mix of girlfriends, but usually if they ever talk about, oh, I was talking to my friend about how I was feeling, it's always a female friend. But then again, my sample is primarily LGBTQ plus, like of the guys I'm thinking of on my caseload that are coming to mind. And if any of my patients are listening to this and you're one of my male patients,
what about me?
Not me. Like, yeah, I know. But the ones that are coming to, because I have majority women, female identifying individuals, but I don't think I have a single cis het one now that I'm thinking about it. And that's obviously the population I work with. So I feel like my sample is like skewed, but even when I do think of the guys I've had in the past, when they talk about if they've had an emotional conversation, it's usually with a female friend or their female partner.
Yeah.
So Tara from California asks, what are the best ways to be proactive about mental health with my tween son as he deals with the roller coaster of beginning puberty and general life things? I love this, Tara.
I don't work with kids or tweens or teens, so I can only go off of what I wish my parents did for me. But
I mean, Justin, do you want to go or do you want me?
No, you got it, Justin.
So my gut instinct was raise your son like you raise your daughters. Like,
I love it.
I love that. Like, and I know that's like blunt, but I mean, I was just thinking like at dinner tonight, So like my husband and I will be like, how's your day? How was your day? And our daughter has started repeating it. How's your day? So we'll ask her. And I mean, she's 2, like she'll be like, fun. Okay. But like, start modeling, like my husband's stepmom's family does this at like dinner. What was your high of the day? What was your low of the day? And everybody answers, it's okay to cry, depending on your relationship. Tara, I'm assuming if you're asking this question, you have a close relationship with your son and or want to be open about things, be open about puberty and what comes with that. Like, and if you have a, male partner or a man in your life that can actually talk about like it from a man's perspective, involve him in it, talking about, they're going to have emotions and like hormones and people are going to be mean in middle school and things like that. But it's okay to express emotions. And when you're feeling a certain way, you can come to me and talk about those things, And also, I tell every parent I work with, especially of my younger kids, model the behaviors you want to see in your child. So if you want your son to be open with his emotions, model that. Now, obviously, as a parent, there are certain things you shouldn't put on your child, but like model like, hey, I am feeling sad because this thing happened to me. What kind of things did anything, this past week upset you, make you sad? Do you want to talk about it? Like I said, if you have a male partner or if there is a man in your son's life, maybe involve him in modeling those behaviors too, having emotional conversations to start that conversation, have that man who can model those things.
Yeah, I know I've been saying a lot with like interaction with men of like meeting them where they're at, but like your tween son, there's still time. Like,
yeah, there is
time to mold and break the box. And yeah, exactly. Ask them about their day, normalize emotional expression, like especially kids and teens, like there's still time. It's like we can't control what's on TikTok, YouTube, and in society, but within your home, you can model the more open expression. And I think that, that's where the work is. Like, I feel like
love that.
Any modeling you can do to normalize feeling sad, down, lost, confused, like vulnerable, like please normalize and model it for them. And they'll learn at a young age. There is a way to communicate and be vulnerable and express my way out of this. If you somehow model that, demonstrate that, encourage that, you've done more than 99%.
I love that.
So Matt from Washington asks, I'm curious how to be okay with my feelings of sadness and wanting to hide every time I am around people. I project my judgment that everyone wants to bully and hurt me, so I self-isolate. All the guys submitting questions are going to make Kate.
I don't know why I can't like handle this. Like I'm so emotional.
They're modeling it though, right?
They are modeling it. It's so good. And I think it's like so refreshing. Go ahead, Jess.
I was going to say, I think because we got a ton of questions, I feel like this is the most we've gotten from individuals that are male identifying.
Men.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
It is.
Yeah, I had to like psych myself up for this episode because when I was reading the polls and I was reading the questions, I was bawling because I was like, so many men are just experiencing this alone. And it's like, my heart. I'm like, oh my God, but this is like society and how everybody socialized, everything that we've talked about. But I think just Matt, you voicing the fact that you're trying to feel okay with sadness is a really great first step. And I'm really glad that you were able to kind of post this. But I think about it this time, like if we feel like we want to hide, I think there's a part of us that doesn't feel accepted, which makes sense from a societal perspective, And I think even just voicing with people who you feel comfortable with, or even just with yourself, is a great first step. I don't know if anybody else has anything else.
I agree. So I think we have time for one more question. So Martin from Virginia asked, can mental health issues affect men's libido? If so, any tips to recover? And I'm so glad we had time for this because I feel like that's an area nobody talks about, how mental health affects libido. So in short, yes,
yes.
It absolutely can.
Yeah. And we know just in general, emotional suppression increases stress, increases cortisol, decreases libido. Like just that is just one mechanism that we just know in our biology tied with mental health and psychology. So being seen, being heard is very freeing. If we know anything about libido, you need to be free to be yourself. It's sexy to be ourselves when you're open and you're seen and you're not having to stuff stuff down. That's when we're freed up. And a lot of men with libido issues and even erectile dysfunction issues, they're anything but freed up because of the things they're taught to suppress and the things they haven't been allowed to let out. So yes, in any number of ways, mental health impacts libido for both men and women.
Yeah. No, and when I think about like how to overcome it, because I know a lot of individuals who have libido issues related to mental health concerns then get stressed about the fact that they have libido issues, especially if they are partnered and they feel like they're not interested in intimacy or can't engage in the way that they want to. And that stress is going to make those issues worse. So if you feel safe talking to your partner, because there's other ways to be intimate that may not, involve like sex. But also if you're open, willing, and is accessible to you, seeking out treatment for whatever mental health issues are contributing to it. Fine. If you can't seek professional treatment, we talk about mindfulness. I feel like almost every episode on this, but mindfulness is very beneficial. Other coping skills. Does exercise help reduce your stress? Getting outside. We've talked about nature a lot on this podcast. Even like journaling, listening to music, things that can help you cope. Focusing on sleep hygiene, adequate, nutrition, things like that are all good steps. But if you stress about the low libido more, it's just going to make it worse.
Yeah. I actually suggest too, I don't know if either of you have heard of sensate focus. Whenever I talk to men who are struggling in this area, and they're partnered and they feel safe with their partner enough to talk about this, I always say, try taking sex off the table and just doing things that you feel completely comfortable with. And if you Google sensate focus, it's like, a little bit of a hierarchy, but basically the premise is removing the pressure. Like Justin is saying, to like just be free to experience things for yourself. And like Jess is saying, like just trying to engage in a way that you feel comfortable with your emotions. It could really be helpful.
Y'all, I just love having this conversation with you too.
This was great.
I love the ways
I was going to say,
I love the ways that you show up for men, both of you. And I hate to admit it, but KBI included. The modeling you do.
Like we hate admitting when she has emotions, but that bitch is there no matter what.
She is. She is. And we need enough people as possible there for men, modeling that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be open. So shout out to all the men, trans men especially. Shout out to you all. We see you. We're here for you. And we want you to be included. We want you to be able to be seen, heard, and vulnerable. And we know that's the path forward for all of us. Really appreciate y'all. As always, the questions, the polls, the engagement, it's so heartfelt. Rate, review, share this with someone. But before we let you go, we're going to do a little reflection question. I want to know specifically, what's one way you're going to check in with a man in your life around their mental health? Tell me what you're going to do. Are you going to invite them to the new Spider-Man movie? Are you going to do some yard work with them? The US Open is this weekend. Actually, I lied. That's this coming weekend. I'm just throwing out things. It would already have passed by the time you're hearing this. What's one way you're going to come alongside a man and again, just see them, hear them, check in on their mental health? You tell me. There's plenty of creative ways. Hopefully you learned a few through this episode. Can't wait to hear about them. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for being a part of this group.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Peace.